Today we read the 12th chapter. Let's dive right into it. May this reading relax your mind and awaken your heart. The sun shone clear and bright in the fresh winter air. I had set out from Lahore at sunrise, walking and hitchhiking 55 kilometers down a single dirt road that cut through, or single lane dirt road that cut through stretches of wheat, cotton, and yellow fields of flowering mustard. Acacia trees lined the roadside, and sometimes a few rows between fields as markers. Otherwise, trees were scarce. More scarce still was the traffic along this road, the few vehicles that did occasionally pass, were as exciting to my senses as the traditional turbans and robes of the people in them. Decrepit trucks rumbled by, each as brightly and intricately painted as a wealthy rock star's psychedelic mobile. An occasional bullock cart, hay-lined and piled high with wheat, livestock, and whole families creaked along. It was on conveyances such as these and my own feet that I reached the Husainiwala border crossing into North India. My heart was swelling with anticipation as I approached the immigration officials. I felt that I had aged 30 years during the 6 months I'd spent crossing Europe and the Middle East, but now I knew that the trials I underwent were necessary purifications for entering sacred India. I was now so close, only steps away. Is it just pronounced Lahore? Good to know, Tattvamasi. Thank you. I'm so used to pronouncing the E's in Sanskrit as A, Lahore. Lahore. Only a stout woman seated alone behind an immigration desk stood between my destiny and I. Her stern glance was not at all inviting. In drab military attire, she sat under the Punjab sun. I stood before her, full of hope and covered in dust. I handed her my passport. India's border security forces flanked her on both sides, rifles slung across their shoulders. While she was examining each page of the document, my thoughts whisked me back to the moment on the mountaintop in Crete that set my feet to follow my heart to India. Something had happened to me on that mountaintop. Some, I knew, would dismiss it as an aberration of the mind brought on by hours of solitary prayer or some kind of hallucination brought on by fasting. But I knew that God had appeared to me in my heart, and I had heard his words loud and clear. Go to India. From that moment on, I'd believed that the Lord was calling me to him in India. 3 months and over 3,000 miles had passed since then on my journey through the Middle East, each moment unlike any I had ever imagined as a boy seeing the world through the ill-fitting lenses lent him by suburban America. And with each mile my heart was flying toward the sacred soils of India, and a rendezvous I knew I could not live without. I longed for India. There my heart's deepest desire might become real. My heart and soul was already with the yogis in their mountaintop ashrams. For months and through unimaginable hazards I had pressed forward to reunite with them. Now, a step from my goal, I stood waiting before the border guard who gripped my passport to India in her bureaucratic hand. She looked up after some minutes of scrutinizing it, her face expressionless. Show me how much money you have. As I reached nervously into my cloth bag, she leaned forward in her chair. There were only a few coins to show her. Disgust crept across her face. You require $200 minimum to enter. She leaned back and folded her uniformed arms across her chest, eyeing me with suspicion. Where is your money? Looking at the ground, I stammered, This is all I have now. You cannot enter then." She slapped the passport down on the table that now stood like a wall between us. "Go back to your own country." Her words were like arrows that pierced my heart. "But I've traveled overland for months, risking my life to see your country. I burn with a desire to study your religions from the holy people." From far away I heard my voice pleading with her. "I have abandoned the comforts of an American home out of love for India. Please, give me a chance." She glared at me now. "We have beggars enough in India. We don't want another one." She motioned to one of the guards, and he raised his rifle. "You will not enter India. You are rejected. Now go back to where you came from." "But that is final. No more discussion." She stood up from the table, turned her back on me, and marched over to a small barracks. I followed her, trying to change her mind, but she shut me out. Her final edict, "You cannot enter India," lacerated my heart. Her colleagues, who until that moment had seemed stiff and impassive, suddenly, upon her declaration, hoisted their rifles and ordered me to leave at once. Shaken, I walked back some distance along the road behind me and sat in the shade of a large neem tree. As I gazed out across the flat green Punjabi countryside, my mind reeled. Where to go? What to do? How long I sat there stunned, I do not know. But when awareness of my surroundings broke through again, I knew that I would not turn back. If that gatekeeper would not grant me entry into the land of my heart's desire, I resolved to remain in the dust under that tree. Never once did I dream that entry to India would be denied me. Ignorantly, as I was of politics, how could I have known that then India and Pakistan were on the eve of their third war since the partition of India? How could I have guessed that 1 year later, in December of 1971, bloody war would break out along this very border where I now found myself? No one had warned me that I was hazarding one of the tensest borders in the world, second in notoriety only to Berlin's Checkpoint Charlie. At Husainiwala, please tell me if I can pronounce that better, 2 armies stood poised, one in Pakistan and one in India, each facing the other in military standoff across the divide. All this was unknown to me on that sunny winter afternoon as I trudged along the road back toward Pakistan. There, from a seat on the dusty ground, I could see my frustrated antagonist pacing beyond the window of her small barracks. Was she expecting a bribe from me? A soul she had mistaken for one possessed of the affluence derived from a Western birth and white skin? Could she even guess all I'd been through to reach this lonely border post? Will I ever get to India? I wondered. After hitchhiking all the way from London, could it really be possible that I would be turning back at the Indian border for want of money? Feeling like an exile, my thoughts turned to my best friend and traveling companion. At our parting, Gary too had looked like an exile. Where was he now? What had become of him? Did he ever make it to Israel? As I sat in the dust of that Punjabi plain, watching the breeze ripple through a through a stand of blooming mustard nearby, I missed my old friend. Over a period of hours, I kept getting up from beneath my tree and returning to the border, but each time the official ignored me. Finally, as a last resort, I pleaded with her again. She stomped the ground with her military boot. "You are testing my patience," she jabbed her stubby finger toward my face, her lips trembling. "You are rejected. Do you hear me? This is my last warning. Don't disturb me again." I turned back to my tree and passed the day in turbulent thought. As the sun was setting, I observed that a shift was about to take place at the immigration desk. An elderly man had come to relieve the woman from her duty. He was a tall Sikh in an elegantly wrapped turban of the same drab beige color as his military uniform. The female official pointed to me, making sure he understood that I was not to enter India. Then an army jeep carried her away. Not knowing what else to do, I meekly approached the new officer, praying in my heart of hearts. I handed him my passport and pleaded, "Please allow me entrance into your great country." His voice was cold and disinterested. "I was warned that you are a nuisance. I have been given strict orders to reject your entry. Now show me sufficient money, or go back." Tears sprang from my eyes as I explained my life and my spiritual aspirations. I have left behind the comforts of America to search for India's spiritual treasures. Risking my life, I've hitchhiked all the way from London to reach your homeland. I yearn to find the way to God. Please be kind to me. Someday, I promise to do something good for the people of India. Honestly, sir, I will help your people. Please give me a chance." Tears filled his eyes. "Give me your passport." As the light of day was fading, he thumbed through my document, then gazed into my eyes and said, "Sometimes a man must follow his heart. I believe in your words." Reaching down to the table, he lifted the stamping tool by its wooden handle, then he pressed the rubber script into an ink pad and with a thump stamped my legal entrance into India. "It is done," he said, closing the passport and handing it back to me. With an affectionate smile, he placed his hand on my head. "Son, I give you my blessings. May you find the truth you are crying for. Welcome to India." Thank you for listening. That ends the 12th chapter of the journey home, and with it, the first act. Next time, we will begin the second act, Mother India. So, it seems our dear author, as the protagonist of his own autobiography, has finally reached the borders of India, and now granted access to the land that his heart desires. So much has happened in these pages of the book thus far. I can only begin to imagine what sorts of experiences will happen in the rest of this book. I invite you all to have any heartfelt reflections you may have. Appreciate the essence of shared spiritual blessings, and transition into our next journey in our Sangha. Thank you all for listening with me. Namaste.